Dagda Bard agus Fáilte. Hi and hello, it's Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School here again. And we continue on with our series of videos here in our kind of YouTube land as we kind of share information about, the Irish gods, about our spiritual practices, about Ireland itself and how that informs ourselves, and then who we are as individuals, as founders of the school, both myself and Laura O'Brien, and as teachers within the school, and how we have kind of come along our path of spirituality. So today I wanted to kind of loop back on something which I shared in one of the previous videos. I told the story of how the Dagda got his club. If you haven't seen that one, it's in there. It is one of the main stories about the Dagda lore, and it links to one of the magic items that's very strongly connected with him, which is this club. One end, the rough end, would kind of cause death to come upon someone if it was touched to them, and the smooth end, or gentle end as it's called, would restore life into someone who had lost it. So that was the kind of power that he took upon himself. Like, this good God, the Dagda literally means good God, in that he's good at everything, but there was one power he didn't have, and that was this power over life and death. But he didn't go to gain that power for himself. He went to gain it for his child, in that his son Kermit, known as Kermit Minbo, because he's like honey mouthed or charming myth, is what that kind of his epithet really means. So Kermit kind of lost his life at the hands of Lou, and Dagda went to find some way to bring him back. So the story, of course, is this story about this magic club. But as I kind of postulated in it, the words used is on Lorog more, but more being the word big, but it also means great. And Lorog could be club or staff, but it also could be example. So maybe, possibly, the story being told is less about a magic stick with death and life on either end of it, and more about the responsibility of power and the use of power in being a good example in how someone should look after their relationships with their family, or what they should do to be a good father in many ways. And that's what leads me on to the video today, because one of the other names, one of the many names that is upon the Dagda, is Ollathair. Now, Ollathair is not all father. And this is one thing we do come across time and again, because there is this title of all father being connected with Odin from the Norse, and because Allard is the Irish word for father, but all, O-L-L, isn't the Irish word for all. It's actually the Irish word for great or ample. So in essence, we have a reference in his name to him being this big, ample kind of figure, but also to him being great, this like great and goodly kind of character, which is then directly linked to his fatherhood. So Alllathair isn't all father, it's actually great father or ample father. So, another way of saying ample father might be to say big dad. So in a way, the Dagda is the big daddy of the Tuatha Dé Danann, well, actually, and also of his family, of his children. So it's one thing that tickles me, and I find it very entertaining in my relationship with the Dagda and my spiritual practice with him, how much he acts in a fatherly role and acts in a fatherly way. And sometimes that's, bringing down the frown of like, I'm not annoyed with you, I'm just disappointed. Oh, totally a dad move there. But also the kind of like the proud, the support, the kind of like, absolutely, you can go ahead and do that. And even if I fail at it, it's like, yeah, I said you could do it. I didn't say you succeeded at it, but you tried. So he's a really good kind of God to have in your corner, not least of all because he's good at pretty much everything, but also because of that big dad energy, that big dad vibe. And that is something that I have heard back. So I often worry that my personal experiences of deity isn't the same as other people's personal experience. Now, we all are unique expressions of humanity. I say it all the time. And our existence is often defined by our perspectives and how we have grown and how we have come along. And that is going to like inform the manner, the way that we kind of interact with deity, because that's personal to us. It's a very unique kind of bond and connection. But there are elements and facets of deity that are fundamental to them, that are nothing got to do with actually us, that are actually the baseline of who they are as independent immortal entities. And so finding that aspect of fatherhood, or this kind of big dad stuff coming back from people who not even people I have taught, people who have experienced the Dagda in their own lives, and then us kind of coming across each other as Dagda folk and being like able to talk about it. And it's like, does he give you the frown? That moment where he's like, he just like, gives you the little frown. It doesn't say anything, but you've kind of not done the best that you could have done. And so it's that kind of experience, and then invariably it'll turn into a supportive kind of joke or a laugh or something like that. So that is the thing I wanted to touch on. This Ollathair. It's so frustrating when people think that it's all father. It is not. That is Odin, entirely different guy, entirely different kind of pantheon, a very different caricature. Like Odin may be a father of gods, but he is very much a different type of father than the Dagda. Now, the Dagda does have many children. Not all of them are listed as having not every mother is listed, but it's very clear where a child is listed as a child of the Dagda. It's almost like they wanted to be very fair and firm about that. Especially with someone like Bridget, the goddess Bridget. She is one of the Tuatha Dé Danann. She is a daughter of the Dagda, and it said in 3 separate locations that she's a daughter of the Dagda. It's almost like daughter of the Dagda. Yeah. Bridget, the goddess poetry. Yeah, daughter of the Dagda. And then later on, Bridget, the daughter of like Smith's work, and daughter of the Dagda. It's linked back to him in many ways. Now, Bridget is an amazing deity in her own right. Absolutely, total props to Bridget. I have a fondness for Bridget, but I don't know if she has a fondness for me, because I tend to be a little bit irreverent. Again, don't do what I do. My path of spirituality is not a standard one to follow in some ways, unless it's the path of exploration, because I will always kind of follow the exploration, follow the lore, follow the story, try and figure it out, and then build my own relationship with those deities in question. So I have a fondness for Bridget, but I tend to be a little bit cheeky about stuff. So that's all I was referring to. So it's important to kind of know where we are within ourselves, our kind of humor, and how that informs within our relationships. Because if you've seen the video on spiritual sensitivity and spiritual sensibility, it is about that relationship. It's about that kind of core quiveness, that right relationship, and being right within yourself so you can be right within your relationship with the deities. And so, yeah, when you're talking about the Dagda, you're talking about him being this father of many different deities. We have Kermit, we also have Bridget, but there's also then Eochaid is another one of his children. And unfortunately, Eochaid is another child of tragedy. So Eochaid lost his life. In fact, Green on Allard is an ancient kind of fortress that is up, oh gosh, it's in Derry? No, Donegal. Oh gosh, I don't have that in my mind. I know exactly. It's a cliff top fortress. It's a big kind of stone ring, that kind of sits right up on a cliff with the sea out beside it. And I don't want to kind of share incorrect information or misinformation. I'll have to kind of look that up again. But it's called Green on Allard, and it got the name Green on Allard because it's a marker site built in honor and in memory of Eochaid, one of the Dagda sons who had passed away. Well, actually been slain, but that's a story for a different time, I'm sure. So we have, Bridget, we have Eochaid. One of the other references, actually, many people ask me about this one, Anya. There's a small reference, whereas Bridget has so much information about Bridget. Now, it's not extensive. There is a lot, but it's not as much as we would love. And Eochaid and Kermit have their stories linked to very specific circumstances and specific tragedy. There are also mention of other children, but those children are mentioned kind of in passing as son of the Dagda or daughter of the Dagda. Oh, Angus, of course, Angus MacOg, the young son. Again, extensive lore because he ties into other stories like the wooing of Aton, and then later on Diarmid and Grania. So that's not the extent of all his children. Yes, people ask me about Anya. There is one line about Anya, his daughter, and that she is the daughter of the Dagda, and that he had given her a basket, and this woven basket was full when the tide was in and empty when the tide was out. And that was the extent of information that I have found to date on that. Now, it's interesting that is the magical properties linked with this basket. and because it's also similar magical properties that are linked with the crane skin bag that Monaghan has, in that all of his treasures are stored within this bag, but it's only ever full when the tide is full, when the tide is in, and it's empty when the tide is out. So there are many kind of children of the Dagda, and then we know that there are grandchildren of the Dagda. If you've caught some of the other videos, there's this book of invasions, this return, these multiple tribes coming into Ireland. The last one that we have record in this series is the Sons of Mill, the Milesians, and they came in invasion. But those last tribe became the Gaels, became like the tribe with the people, the humans in essence, who moved in and lived in Ireland. So Irish ancestry is going back to that to a certain degree, and it's their kind of relationship then with the Tuatha Dé Danann that kind of causes the future of Ireland to kind of be so interlinked with the other world, with the other crowd. But it's actually the three grandsons of the Dagda are kings in Ireland at that point. And it's not just his grandsons. In fact, it's the three grandsons who were the three sons of Kermit, who had died and been brought back to life. And so it's these three lads who are king in Ireland, and it says that they are wed to three goddesses of sovereignty in Ireland, Banva, Fotla, and Eru. And so each of the kings, in order to kind of forge the right relationship between the right rule of a king and the land and the abundance of the land and the spiritual connection with the other world, they had to wed goddesses of sovereignty in these positions. And so that's the three, Fotla, Banva, and Eru. And it is through the actions of the Milesians as they come in. One particular character, Amergin Glungal, the bard or filla of the Milesians, as he negotiates the conversation and negotiates his arrival and his tribe's arrival, his Tua's arrival into Ireland. He communes with each of these goddesses and says that the goddess's name will forever be upon the land, will forever be on the island. And in fact, it's still proved true, because Ireland is Era in Irish, and Era comes from Eru, which is that goddess. So yes, the reason why I wanted to kind of touch base is to talk about this fatherly aspect of the Dagda. And it's not just a father of blood. We have so many kind of stories of him being like, Midder. Midder is another one of his children. But it's also said that he's a foster father for Monaghan MacLear. Yes, Monaghan, son of the sea himself, of the crane skin bag, is one of the foster children of the Dagda in one version of the tales. And so it's that kind of cultural awareness that we have, because we've seen it with Lou. He was put in fosterage with Monaghan, which would kind of make, Dagda's influence on Monaghan, then Dagda's influence on Lou. That's an interesting one to think about. But it's then also Lou was in fosterage with Tailtiu, the Firbolg kind of noble or princess who remained in a position of authority within Ireland after the Tuatha Dé Danann kind of won the first war of Battle of Moytura. So it's a very common practice that, you wouldn't always be raised with your biological parents. You'd be raised as part of the Tuatha, as part of the tribe, and you would have fosterings. And it wasn't just a case of, oh, well, you have to go and or bondage or hostages. Now, that was some parts of it later on during the cycle of kings. If you conquered a territory, you take some of the children in fosterage and they would become part of your household. But there was that overhanging threat that I have your kids. But that's not what the circumstance were back in the mythological cycle, where it was the collective who would actually raise the children and kind of see through to the next generation coming on. So yeah, I started this video going, I need to talk about Ollathair and how it's not all father. But then, of course, you can't really talk about it. Oh, also, one of the other mistranslations is father of many. The Ollathair isn't father of many, it's great or ample father, technically by translation. He is a father of many. He is, the big dad to many of his own kind of children, but also to foster children and also to the tribe in many ways. And it's something I've experienced working and dealing with the Dagda. And I think that for some people is a way to maybe have a different experience or different connection to him as a deity. Now, not everyone has a good relationship with their biological father. Let's be fair. people are fallible, people make mistakes, and some males raised in particular cultures of particular generations can have a lot of problems. And so when I grew up, as I mentioned in my last video, I'm very fortunate in that I had a very present and very active kind of father figure in my life. And though like he was corporally punished when he was in school, he didn't bring that into our household. We had different forms of punishment. It was like, chores, labor, actually restorative justice in many ways. Though, oh, well, you broke that kind of thing. Well, you lose your pocket money until it's paid for. So there was different ways to kind of establish discipline in the household, but also to have conversations. It was never done with threat or with anger, which I'm very grateful for. But not everyone has that experience, especially with masculinity and especially with fathers, because that's one thing that is possibly a matter of definition for me. Whenever I talk about it, it's like anyone can be a father. That to me is a function of biology for the most part. But not many people can be a dad. That is some, well, actually everyone can be a dad. It is about, a different kind of approach to that relationship and to how to, nurture the next generation, how to bring them along, how to show them through your own actions what kind of person you should be, like what kind of person they could be within the world, how to live in right relationship with yourself, in right relationship with your deities, with your Ireland, or your land, your planet, your communities, your Tua, and then, trust that by showing that behavior, you're kind of encouraging them to find their feet within that as well. It applies irrespective of gender or sex or anything like that at all. Actually, I have to not cross my words on that one, but it doesn't have to be just for boys or girls or non-binary folk. Like, you live as an example for anyone, every young person who comes up. I'm the adopted uncle of so many of my friends' children because they just, appreciate the way that I kind of move around in the world, I guess. And I have to give my props to my father for that in many ways, and my mother, but then also for having chosen to be different to the things that I could be different to, and to try and improve myself, and to know that when my story has ended, when they write the last words in the book of Jon O'Sullivan and the last page turns and the cover kind of closes, maybe there'll be enough influence afterward, the fact that will carry on with positive memories for those who've kind of come after. And I think that's a big part, not just of like legacy or anything like that at all. It's not about that. It's about living the best version of yourself you can be, so that when all is said and done, you've done enough, you've done the best you could, but then other people are left with positive experiences, positive memories, positive lessons that they can then carry forward in their own lives and pass on. So that is a big part of my relationship with the Dagda. I have this very odd connection to an immortal dad, the big daddy of the Tuatha Dé Danann, this kind of one who has always been fatherhood, always been that connection to his tribe, his people. And again, it's not about blood. It's not just about, genetics or DNA. It is about relationship and that idea of right relationship. So hopefully there's been something in that. It hasn't just been a John rant. Hopefully it's been there's some mythology. Well, actually there's a bit of mythology in the lore there, and that's kind of how I would do it. I consume the stories, I explore the stories, I look at the cultural influences, I look at the ancient history that we have, and then I kind of moderate those into how we kind of adjust our own kind of relationship going forward in our spirituality. So again, thank you for being with us here on YouTube. Thank you for the likes, the comments, the subscribes. Do hit the bell for notifications, and just make sure you know when the next video pops up into your feed. So until next time, look after yourself, take care of yourself, and slán. Goodbye.